Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. All right. I want to welcome you. I want to thank you for coming out to this day that we have planned. It's a fun-filled, amazing day that we have. So welcome to the faculty experience and also the taste of the professional development at Padron campus. Today we have a wonderful, just full day of relaxation, of professional development, of games, of just excitement. We did this in anticipation that we'll be able to reconnect, to revive ourselves, and be ready for the upcoming semester. So I want to thank you all for coming out. I do hope you all enjoy all that wonderful activities that we have planned. I do want to give you a little rundown of what's going to happen today. And just let you know that you're invited to come in as you choose to different sessions in and out. You can come to as many of or as less of activities that you would like to come to. There are so many amazing, amazing sessions that are going to take place. So find something that interests you. For some people, I know they're very excited about this, so they've been letting me know, hey, I want to check out that amazing room that you have for faculty. Or, hey, I want to check out these other morning sessions that you have. So before we get started, I want to give you a rundown. On your tables, you have the agenda in front of you. So, of course, right now we're in the beginning stages of registration, networking, breakfast. We'll also go into the welcome, which myself, I'm the director. My name is Naasia Campbell. I'm the director of the Faculty Institute of Teaching and Learning. You may have seen us do a number of professional development activities throughout the years that we've been on this campus, and we'd love to just continue to do that. So this is one of the amazing kickoffs that we have for you. We have some wonderful things lined up. We have worked together with many of the faculty to make this possible. So many of your faculty, many of your colleagues that you're out there with right now have been instrumental in planning and making sure that this is a great event for each and every one of you. So this is an event for you by you, okay? Today, we will have our welcome by myself, Dr. Malou Harrison, our president, Dr. Overeye. We have a wonderful keynote speaker named Mr. Warren Berger. You'll hear a little bit more about him, but he has been all over the U.S. Just giving some amazing speeches, and I'm sure that you're going to absolutely love it. We also have some morning sessions. There'll be concurrent sessions that'll be going on, so that's why I say find something that speaks to you and see if there's something that you would be interested in and be able to take back into your classroom and even your lives. We will have sessions dealing with stress in the workplace. We'll have sessions on the Presidential Innovation Fund. We have a room actually catered toward our faculty where you can go and do some yoga, some relaxation. And we have some amazing faculty that made that happen. Your colleagues, such as Dr. Miriam Abedi, helped to create this room in a very warm and inviting space for you all. We also have Mr. Berger that will be doing the power of questioning immediately following his keynote address. We also have a resource fair during the lunch hour, so you'll be able to come out and socialize and also see some resources that are available for you here on this campus. We have Microsoft coming, we have Follett coming, we have the Consortium of Miami-Dade for Health. We have Access. We have a lot of programs here that are available for you. And we will be there because we also offer you resources that you may or may not know, books, various things that we have, supplies and different things like that, that we can supply for you. Also during that hour, we will have lunch provided for you in room 401. So please come out and let's break some bread and to also start our new year off. We have also some concurrent afternoon sessions where you'll be able to see some of the amazing things that a lot of you a lot of your faculty have been working with and working on. You guys are doing some amazing work out there. I know you are doing it because I'm seeing it, and your colleagues are seeing it, and people are talking about it. So I would love for you guys to come back out in the afternoon so you can see some of the amazing work that your colleagues are doing within their classrooms. So in our afternoon sessions, we have some concurrent sessions that are going on. We have movement, metaphor, and play in the classroom where you'll learn some interactive things to do in your classroom. We have the ABCs of grant writing, where we have some faculty that are interested in writing grants and are interested in, in doing various things in their profession. So, and we also have panel discussions where you have and be able to see some of your colleagues talk about some of the amazing things that they have going on in their classes, some of the things that they're learning from all these different professional development experiences that they're been exposed to, and just give you an opportunity to just run ideas across with each other, okay? So also, we'll close out with our faculty exhibits, where we'll have a few exhibits back here in this room where we will have the opportunity to see firsthand some of the things that you guys are doing, okay? So that's kind of a rundown of the schedule today. I hope that you guys find something that connects to you, that connects with you. I hope that you guys have a wonderful, wonderful spring semester and complete this year off fabulously, because we are entering into a new decade, and I'm pretty sure that we're entering into some amazing things, okay? So without further ado, I would like to bring up Dr. Malou Harrison, our president, as she continues to welcome you back for an amazing, amazing year. Thank you.
Thank you, Nyasia, and good morning. I know it's very cold out there. It's pretty chilly, It's a wonderful day, though, when we have had 2 weeks off to spend with family, with friends, with loved ones, to really refresh ourselves, to decompress, and to come back fully refreshed and revived to a brand new term, a new decade in 2020 here at the Padron campus. So welcome to each and every one of you. I am so happy to be back here at the campus this term, and I'm happy to be back because of all of you and our students. And Nyasia, you said it extremely well. Our faculty are doing amazing work each and every day, inside and outside of the classroom. And today really is a day where our faculty will be showcased, and we will be able to learn from each other. As we talk about that, let me tell you that our enrollment has declined here at the college and also at the Padron campus. We're looking at a 9% decline in enrollment as opposed to where we were last year. And it's sad. It's not a good place for us to be. But about a couple of weeks ago, our college president, Dr. Montoya, in speaking with the Board of Trustees and addressing the issue of enrollment, I think portrayed it extremely well. And what Dr. Montoya said to the board is, the college is experiencing an enrollment decline like never before. We have not seen these dismal percentage declines in many, many years. Actually, I haven't seen this type of decline in the time that I've been at the college. However, when you look at, and this is what Dr. Montoya shared, when you look at the low unemployment rates that our nation and our community are experiencing, what that tells us is that we are living in a time of somewhat prosperity. Prosperity meaning that there are jobs out there, right? And there are jobs that our students and our neighbors and ourselves are able to garner in a way that perhaps when the economy is not as prosperous were not able to do so. So you have a prosperous economy, you have individuals going out to work because there's the opportunity for work, and therefore they're not coming to school. Now, the adage is, can you blame individuals who are now able to perhaps work 1 or 2 or 3 jobs, put more food on the table, perhaps save a little bit more, and therefore have sacrificed their schooling to go out to work? No, you can't blame individuals, but what we can do is educate our students to let them know that while they have that opportunity of work, they should still continue to advance themselves and their credentials. And perhaps a student may not be able to attend full-time, but certainly students should not stop out. They should take perhaps a part-time load of courses. So this is the dilemma that we're facing. Dr. Troy mentioned to me this morning that it's about 700 students less that we have. That's the equivalent of about 9% down in enrollment as opposed to last year. And even with that, our student services personnel are on the second floor working feverishly to enroll and advise students as we speak. So many of our student services colleagues are not in the room this morning because they're serving students and trying to get students matriculated so they can begin their classes as early as tomorrow. So a little bit of news. It's not a damper in any respect. It is the reality that we are facing. And in that regard, we want to keep every single student that we have. We want to make sure that they know of the resources that are here available to them in every single respect, whether it's an academic resource or whether it's a resource that will help them with some life issue. And we have that here at the Padron campus, and we want to make sure that we are promoting that heavily, that we are identifying students that might need this assistance, and that we're aggressively referring and hand-holding our students to be able to take advantage of those so they can continue to persist and advance toward the ends of their degrees. So on to what we have here this term, which I believe is going to be a fabulous academic term, spring term. And it's fabulous because we're starting off on a wonderful note, right? The faculty experience, a taste of professional development at the Padron campus, many of the sessions being facilitated by our own faculty, sharing your best practices, your promising practices, and ways that we can all move forward and enhance student success. So thank you to each and every one of the faculty here today, and for your contributions to making sure that every single student, and we're serving here at this campus about 15,000 students, and we have our guest speaker here, Mr. Warren Berger. You'll hear more from him later. But when we told Mr. Berger that at Miami-Dade College we're serving 165,000 students, we also said that we're committed to making sure that our class sizes stay small, because every single student is an individual with a name and a story that we respect and regard highly. There are no numbers here at Miami-Dade College. There are no numbers here at the Padron campus. We have people, we have human beings that we care about, and each and every individual has an opportunity, and we're very, very proud of that. So as I close, we have new family members here at the Padron campus, and I'd like to introduce them to you this morning. I believe most of them are here, and I'd like to start off with the new faculty that we have at our campus. So, Dr. Dinesh Vidani in chemistry. Would you please stand up so we can see who you are and welcome you? Welcome. Thank you. Dr. Jason Claiborne, biology. He stepped out for a moment. How about Dr. Adolfo Mendez, physics? There's Dr. Mendez. Welcome. Professor Maria Thevenot, humanities. Welcome. Professor Janae Judge Hemans, speech. Okay, still traveling back. She went abroad, right? Yes, she did. That's what I thought. Thank you to each and every one of you. You have an amazing opportunity here at the Padron campus. I started out by saying that we have new family members at the almost said Inter-American. Oh my goodness. At the Padron campus. And we truly take that seriously. You do have a peer or two that want to, are interested, and very willing to support and assist and help you here at the campus as you commit to serve students. So thank you and welcome to each of the faculty that are new. Let's give them another round of applause. We also have some new administrators here. We have none other than Professor Richard Tapia, Chairperson of Social Sciences. And I say professor because Mr. Tapia was a full tenured faculty member, and still is, at the North Campus, and has transitioned to administration to serve as Chairperson of Social Sciences. And we are very, very pleased to have him on board here at the Padron campus. Welcome. We also have Diane Sinawi, Director of Recruitment. I don't believe she's in the room because she's over on the second floor serving students. And we also have Yonesis Bentora, who is the Director of our TRIO EOC program, who has recently joined our campus family. So with that, I want to welcome you again to the spring term. We look forward to working together collaboratively toward the success of our students. We have a guest in our midst, Ms. Margaret Shippey from our district administration. Thank you, Margaret, for joining us this morning. It's always good to have you on campus. And again, thank you for everything you do, and best wishes for a most productive and enjoyable spring term. Thank you.
So good morning and welcome to the new semester. Really glad that we're having this opportunity to engage before the term begins. My hope is that you will use the experience to refresh, revitalize, and re-engage. So as the people who have spoken before me, Dr. Harrison and Naisha Campbell has said, today is really a day for you to come in, participate in the things that you want to, and to go back to and get ready for tomorrow, right? The excitement begins again. So I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker, Mr. Warren Berger, who's developed his inquiry skills as a journalist for the New York Times, but he was first declared himself a questionologist with the publication of his internationally best-selling book, A More Beautiful Question. So as you go to the sessions today, I'm hoping you'll have lots of questions, right? Because Naisha, when she went to a conference, met Mr. Berger, and she came back excited. He's good. Well, you need to hear him. You need to see what he has to say. You need to hear. So we're hoping that as you go through the sessions, for example, you have the dealing with stress in the workplace with Whitson Faustin, that you're going to have lots of questions about how to deal with stress, right? And as you go to the innovations workshops, with Margaret Shippey. You're going to be able to come back because we want people to apply to those, right? You have the yoga with Master Lee from South Korea. You have movement from Dr. Briggs. I'm sure you've all heard and seen Dr. Briggs at one point, right? Teresa Grandel will be here in the afternoon for the grant writing. The educational innovation, we have the panel discussion with our dear faculty, Diana Tang, Miriam, I'm looking for the face as I'm talking, but I can't see her right now. But the idea is that you participate in at least one of these things. We hope at least you can come out and support your faculty peers. And as we listen to Dr. Warren, who has also done amazing things, he's participated in the NASA space program, participated in some workshops through the National Science Foundation. His books will be available. The FITIL has also ordered a couple copies, and there will be book signing during the afternoon lunch. Again, lunch is sponsored, so you're getting breakfast and lunch, right? So feel free to come back out and at least get one-on-one time with him when he signs his books. So on that note, please give a warm Miami-Dade College Padron campus welcome to Warren Berger.
Good morning. So how is everyone this morning? Okay, that was a rote question I just asked you. Now, a rote question is a question you ask just out of habit, like, what's up, how are you, how's it going? I tend to focus on a different kind of question. I focus on questions that are a little more intentional, a little more thoughtful, and questions that can lead to big things, questions that can lead to change. So that's kind of my thing, and we'll talk about that today. As in the introduction it was mentioned, I am a questionologist. And how many of you are familiar with that term? No, I got to work harder on this. Okay, so yes, I did make it up. I've been studying questioning for a long time, like for decades, going back to when I was a reporter, a newspaper reporter, and my job was to ask questions. And I thought it was kind of strange because I went through journalism school. I went to Syracuse University, and I went through journalism school, and there was never a course or any formal training on asking questions, which, if you think about it, is really weird. That would be like someone going through a welding program and never being given a welding gun, right? The most basic tool that a journalist has is the question, right? And there was never any training in that. So I thought that was kind of strange, and that kind of got me on this thinking that, maybe we don't pay enough attention to questions, and maybe we need to focus on it a little more. And so that's basically, I guess what I did was, first I questioned, why is there no such thing as a questionologist? And then I did what good questioners do. They start out by asking why, but then they ask, what if? So I then proceeded to say, what if I just declared myself a questionologist? And I did. I actually did it a few years ago in the pages of the New York Times, and no one questioned it. So I've been a questionologist ever since. I'm actually trying to build this as a discipline. There are about probably a dozen other questionologists around the world that I am in touch with, and we talk to each other, and we try to think about how we can spread this movement of questioning. And I would love to see, universities and colleges, establish the study of questionology. Maybe it's something for you guys to think about. Open a department of questionology. But it's a really important thing to think about and study, because it has to do with every aspect of our lives. The ability to ask questions well, it enables us to communicate with others. It's great for relationships. Marriages are much better off when people are asking questions more. But it also, you look at the business world, and it's directly tied to innovation. It's tied to good management. Good managers, good leaders are ask questions well of their people. So it's such an amazing tool, and we don't pay enough attention to it. We kind of take it for granted. You know, we kind of think of questioning like breathing, you know. Oh, kids can do it, everyone can do it, it just comes naturally. Not really. It's something worth thinking about and paying attention to. So anyway, since I've started doing questionology, I've been going around to a lot of companies. They are interested in questioning from the standpoint of innovation. So Dr. Harrison earlier was talking about the challenges that the college is facing. Well, I can tell you that I've been going around the business world, and everybody is facing some kind of a big challenge these days. I mean, I don't know what it is. I guess it's because the world is in transition, you know. Technology has changed everything. So I go around to these companies that are 100-year-old companies, or in the case of a company I've been working with a lot lately is Starbucks. And so, you know, that's like a 50-year-old company, but they're, you know, Starbucks is like in the midst of a huge change, because when they came along, and by the way, they started with a question. They started with the founder of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, had gone to Europe and he'd seen these amazing cafes that everyone was going to in Europe. And he said, why don't we do that in the US? Why is it that when the US we go into a coffee shop, we grab a cup of coffee and we run? How come we don't have this great coffee experience in the US? And so he brought that to America, and it was amazing, right? And of course, we all know Starbucks, huge success. But now, today, everybody, you know, every block you go on has like a little gourmet coffee shop. So all of a sudden, what Starbucks owned is now everywhere. And so they have to like step back and say, wait a minute, what do we do now? Like, if there's a gourmet coffee shop on every block, what is our role as Starbucks? Well, how do we become different then? What can we do? So they have to start asking a lot of questions, and that's what you know, when I go there, I try to help them with that kind of questioning. I go to other companies as well, Disney and lots of others. NASA space program was mentioned. I'm going to be going to the US Army and talking to them about questioning. But I also spend a lot of time going to schools, and that's kind of a passion of mine, is going to schools. Some universities, but a lot of K through 12 elementary schools. And so when I go to schools, I'm going to, the reason I'm going is to try to talk to, usually to teachers, about how can we encourage more questioning in the classroom by students. So this is, most recently I went to Appalachia and I was working with both teachers and students on just formulating questions. And these were, you know, as Appalachia, of course, this is one of the most economically challenged areas in the country. Coal mining towns that just got devastated when the coal industry kind of fell apart. And these kids were amazing. I mean, they really picked up on the idea of asking more questions. They love it. They're naturally curious. And so you can see that there's this wonderful gift that kids have, and a lot of times it's not being used enough in school, because the system of school is too much about giving kids the answers and having them memorize it, and so there's not enough of that curiosity and questioning. So I talk a lot about how could we bring that out? How could we bring that out more in kids? So we'll talk a little bit more about that today as well. I also want to talk about what makes someone a good questioner, and for you guys, you know, I'm sure many of you are already good questioners, but I want to talk a little bit later about how to sort of challenge yourself as a questioner. Maybe you can be better as a questioner, and then you can model that behavior for your students. So when I look at who are great questioners, you know, artists are great questioners. So, you know, artists are oftentimes pursuing questions in their work. You know, I love this line from the writer James Baldwin. So what the artists are trying to get at is the question, you know? What is the question we're all grappling with? And a lot of times that drives and defines their work. It's not about answers, you know? It's about the search and the quest. Innovators, I think I mentioned earlier, questioning and innovation directly related. Steve Jobs, known to be a great, great questioner. This is an interesting quote I found from him. I interviewed Jobs years ago, did not get to interview him for the book. He was already in poor health at that point. But anyway, he had said years ago that this was the most important thing he learned about running Apple, which I find interesting. He said, if I go around the company and I ask why, so he would go into the accounting department and he'd ask, why are we using this system of accounting? Or he'd go into the marketing department, why are we doing it this way? And he said that was one of the most important things he could do. And he thought it was one of the most important things any leader can do. And I tell this to leaders of schools, of companies. You need to have that spirit of going through your organization and questioning all of the habits, all of the things that have become ingrained, because those things need to be challenged. You know, they may need to be changed, they may need to be updated, and that won't happen unless you're willing to question them. So innovators, of course, scientists, we know science is rooted in questioning the scientific method, so scientists are great questioners, and of course, maybe the greatest scientist of all. Einstein was an amazing questioner, and Einstein talked about questioning a lot in his writing. Einstein once said that if he had an hour to solve a problem, and his life depended on it, he would spend the first 55 minutes of that hour making sure he was answering the right question. Because what Einstein understood was that if you're going down the wrong path, you can do all the research in the world, you can do all the work, you're just going to be moving in the wrong direction. So you have to start by making sure you're solving the right problem and you're answering the right question. And I like to think if Einstein were around today, he would blurb my book. Einstein also once said, never lose a holy curiosity. He thought of curiosity as something holy, which he also said that the way you get better at questioning is to ask more questions, which I think is a great thought to keep in mind. Even pop cultural figures can be great questioners. Oprah Winfrey, an amazing questioner. So Oprah, now I'm not a big reader of O Magazine. My wife reads O Magazine. It doesn't really speak to me that much. But a year ago, Oprah dedicated an entire year of the magazine to big questions, pursuing big questions. So every issue was about some type of a big question. So she scored a lot of points with me when she did that. I thought that was a great way to frame the magazine. And lastly, among types of people who are great questioners, I want to mention, this might surprise some people, comedians. Comedians are great questioners. What a lot of comedians do is look at the world around us and question why things are the way they are, but they do it in a way that's funny. So one of my personal favorite comedians was the late George Carlin. And George Carlin was an amazing questioner. So George Carlin asked questions like this. And it's really true if you think about it. Here's another question that Carlin was known for. So I didn't get, again, he was someone I would have loved to have interviewed. When I was doing my book, I would have loved to have interviewed George Carlin. He died, which was going to make it tough to do the interview. But he had died right around about a year before I wrote the book. So I ended up interviewing his daughter. His daughter, Kelly Carlin, who is a great student of her father's work. And she told me that George Carlin was all about observing and questioning. That was his thing. And she said, I thought this was kind of interesting. She said that George Carlin thought of himself like an alien from outer space who had come here to watch all of us Earthlings. And he was just kind of standing there watching us saying, look at what they're doing now. Isn't that weird? You know? So he would notice things like, you know, like the fact that, you know, when you're looking for your car keys and you might look for them over here, and then 10 seconds later you'll look in the same place again. And then a minute later you'll look in that same place again. So he would notice these weird things we do, and then that became the basis of his comedy. And now you see that has been passed along. You see the same thing with Jerry Seinfeld or Chris Rock or you name it. I mean, great comedians will do that. They will base it on very close observation, and then they ask questions. They question what it is they're seeing and what they're doing. So anyway, I have studied all these great questioners, tried to take lessons from each of them. However, I have not yet mentioned the greatest questioner of all amongst these giants of questioning. By the way, that is in the lower right, that's Socrates. And of course, Picasso. Who else here? Well, you know all the rest. So does anybody want to guess who occupies the center box there as the greatest questioner of all time? Children? Yes, that's exactly right. However, I am going to be more specific than that, okay? And I am going to say that the greatest questioner is not just a generic child, but specifically a 4-year-old girl, okay? So a 4-year-old girl could be considered the ultimate questioning machine. This has been borne out by research, right? There's been some studies that show 4 years old is the peak. Boys are right there too. I mean, they're asking a lot of questions, but the girls are even slightly ahead. Well, according to one study, it was in excess of 300 questions a day from a 4-year-old girl. And the study found that most of them directed at her mother. And the writer of the study made a funny remark and said that he reasoned that the reason the mother gets most of the questions is because when the daughter asks her father, he says, "Go ask your mom." So I don't know if that's actually true or not. But anyway. It's a fascinating thing, and it requires a lot of patience on the part for parents to deal with this. You know, it requires a lot of patience because the questions keep coming and coming and coming, you know. What's really going on there is really interesting, you know, in the mind of a 4-year-old. Their mind is rapidly expanding, you know, and they're making like a million connections, mental connections between this and that and what they're seeing around them. And so every time they see a possible connection, they ask about it. Sometimes they're just trying to drive you crazy. But a lot of times they're trying to piece together what's going on in the world. And questioning is the tool that allows them to do that. You know, they figure out very young, maybe around age 3, that there is this tool they have, that they simply have to change the inflection of their voice and put a question mark on the end, and people will tell them stuff. People will answer questions for them. So they begin to use that tool a lot. Now, as I say, it can be very annoying. It can drive people crazy, right? And so parents may find themselves saying, gee, I wish all these questions would stop. I wish they'd just stop. Be careful what you wish for, because they do. If they don't stop, for many kids, they decline. And they start to decline pretty quickly. It seems to, by some of the research I've looked at, it seems to be happening as they enter elementary school. So they come in as these peak questioners, age 4 or 5, and then as they get into school, the questioning kind of just goes downhill. And so there's a great quote from the education writer Neil Postman, who said that children enter school as question marks and leave as periods. And this is an issue. This is a problem, because there's also research that shows as questioning is declining, so is student engagement, and they seem to be going down at around the same level, at the same pace. And you know, what's the relationship between those two? it's like chicken and egg. Who knows? I mean, is their engagement level going down because they're not asking questions? Is their questioning going down because they're not engaged? I don't know, but we know those two things are connected. So if they're not questioning, they're not engaged. And big issue. So why is that happening? I mean, does anybody have a thought on, what might be causing that decline in questioning or that downward trend? Yeah. Siri, Alexa, and Google. Yes. But I would say yes, except this trend has been going on before they were there. This trend was going on before Siri ever existed, before Alexa ever existed, before Google. So that is a factor, and that makes it even more of a challenge now to get kids to ask questions. And I'll talk about that later. Maybe we can discuss the whole Google thing. Google is a double-edged sword for questioning. It's both good and bad. And I can talk about that later, why it's good and bad. But yeah. Yeah, modeling is a big factor. I think one of the things we see in schools is that it's really important for teachers to model curiosity and to model the idea that they don't have all the answers, which is kind of, that's a counterintuitive idea for a lot of teachers. A lot of teachers feel like, gee, that's not right for me to show that I don't know something or I don't have the answers because I'm supposed to be the teacher. And it's the same problem in the workplace with bosses and people running companies. They feel like, oh, I can't reveal that kind of vulnerability. I can't show that I don't know something because the people will lose respect for me. And in fact, it's just the opposite. I mean, I think leaders, teachers, parents all need to model the behavior of curiosity and wonder. And that means showing that you don't have all the answers and that you don't know everything, but that you're curious about it and that you're willing to explore. So yeah, that's another huge factor. I think, there's a lot of factors. It's probably, countless factors. I have kind of zoomed in on probably 4 that I think are really big in this problem, in this challenge. Oh, by the way, I just want to say that Neil Postman said, they enter as questions, leave as periods. I think the goal is to have them enter as questions and leave as bigger questions, right? So their questions, we want to enlarge their questions. That's the goal. So getting back to the things that are working against questioning, I mean, knowledge, weirdly enough, knowledge can be an enemy of questioning. So the more you know, the less you question. And so kids, when they're young, don't know much, and so they're wide open and they're questioning everything. As they start to build some sense of how the world works around them, they start to question less. So the challenge is to convince them that even though they know some stuff, there's still a lot they don't know and they should still be questioning. And by the way, this is a problem for adults too. I mean, adults have this problem maybe even worse than kids in terms of we think we know more than we do. And so we kind of think, oh, I've seen it all. Yeah, I've seen that before. Yeah. So we get very cynical and we get sort of comfortable in our knowledge. We get comfortable in our own expertise. Anyone who's been on a job for 10 years or more starts to fall into that trap, right? They start to feel like, yeah, I've got this figured out. Yeah, I know how to do this job. Yeah, I've seen it all before. Don't tell me about it, this new thing. I've seen it all before. And big problem. In the world of business these days, companies are trying to deal with this issue. Companies have to change, and then when they try to change, there's a whole layer of people, like middle managers, who are like, no, we're not going to change. No, I don't want to change. I figured out how to do this. I spent 10 years figuring out how to do this. I'm not going to change. So it's a big problem. We get really comfortable. It's sometimes referred to as the trap of expertise. You get trapped by your own expertise. You start to assume, I don't need to question anymore. I don't need to explore anything new. I've got it down. I've got it figured out. Yeah.
As far as teachers are concerned, at one time, teachers were the font of knowledge. Now, students have this.
Yeah.
And that's another thing.
That's another thing. Well, all that knowledge is at our fingertips now. And it's kind of interesting, that relationship of that with education and with questioning. But what I would say is, all of that knowledge is there at our fingertips, but if we don't know how to use it, and we don't know how to access it, and we don't know how to determine what's true and what isn't, or what's relevant or what isn't, what would someone say? Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. It's like that knowledge, that's like a false sense of power that it gives us, that we have all this stuff there. It doesn't really. In a way, it could hurt us, because a lot of it is bad knowledge. A lot of it is bad information. A lot of it is irrelevant stuff. So right now, we've got a problem in this country with that. You know, we've got a problem, I'm sure you guys know, we've got a critical thinking crisis in this country, you know. And the problem is not that there's not enough information, because all these people who are doing poor critical thinking, they've got plenty of information. They've got information coming at them from all sides. But the problem is they don't know what to do with that information. They don't know how to filter it. They don't know how to figure it out. And so they're just being turned every which way by it. So anyway, knowledge is a big, big factor. We have to, you know, we have to get away from this idea, you know, and it's true of everybody, that we kind of know already, and, you know, I just go with my gut or whatever. That idea that you know is a big, big problem, and it works against questioning. Coolness. With kids in school, questioning is not cool. Now, I don't understand this being a questionologist, because I think it's very cool, but it's not cool. I mean, when you raise your hand in class, you're like, people either think you're trying to kiss up to the teacher, or you're trying to show off how smart you are, or something. It's just doesn't, it's not seen as cool, you know? In the world of teenagers, being cool either means you know already or you don't care. If you don't know, then you don't care. And that's what makes you cool, okay? So anyway, that's a big thing to take on, you know, but I think that attitude is something that has to be addressed in some way. And I'll talk about that later, how I think, you know, questioning could be made cool. It's an uphill battle, but I'm trying to do it. Okay, I just want to mention a couple of other quick factors. Fear, of course. Fear is a big one, you know, because everyone is afraid to reveal that they don't know something. You know, they're afraid to raise their hand and say, you know, ask a question where someone might say, oh, that's a stupid question, you know, or gee, we covered that already. You know, so that fear factor is really, really big, and I think that's one of the things that has to be addressed. There are ways to do that. Time is one of the biggest, right? Questioning takes time, and so in a world where we're all moving really fast, a lot of times the person who asks questions is seen as slowing things down, right? And it's a big, big problem. Questioning, some of you may be familiar with the work of Daniel Kahneman, who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow, and he divided thinking into two types of thinking, fast thinking and slow thinking. Questioning is slow thinking. It's reflective, it's thoughtful, and it's the opposite of fast thinking, which is gut, going with your gut, your first reaction, your first instinct. So I think right now we're in a world that's very much goes with its gut, way too much. Like, we're in love with the idea of gut instinct right now. We think gut instinct is the greatest thing. And if somebody says, if some guy gets up there and says, I go with my gut, and I'm always right, we're susceptible to that, you know. And in fact, going with the gut has been proven by scientists that it's usually wrong, or it's often wrong. I mean, when we're going with our gut, we're basing it on weird instincts and weird experiences that often have nothing to do with the decision we're making right now. So it's not a good way to go. Some people get away with it for a certain amount of time. The only ones who get away with it consistently are chess masters. Chess masters develop such a good gut instinct about moves to make that they can go with their gut, and they're often right. But for most people, including business executives who will try to tell you they have a great gut instinct, over time, they usually make a lot of big mistakes. And it's because they're not thinking enough. They're not doing their homework. They're not doing their research. They assume that there's a shortcut and the shortcut is this feeling they have in their gut. They're wrong. So anyway, time. We don't want to spend the time on questioning. I'm going to refer back to George Carlin one more time here. George Carlin said once, "Some people see things that are and ask, why? Some people dream of things that never were and ask, why not? Some people have to go to work and don't have time for all that shit." So that's kind of sums up the attitude toward questioning that you see in the world a lot, which is that, hey, it's a nice idea that we should be asking more questions and philosophizing and wondering and all that, but who has time? Nobody has time for that stuff. Of course, Carlin is not being serious here. He's joking because all he did was ask questions and make time for questions. Okay, so in my thinking, we need to, talk about how might we make questioning safe, cool, rewarding for our students to think of it that way, to feel that way about it. There's different approaches that can be used. I think there's something interesting that I'm going to share with you guys. For those of you who are in the session later, we'll do something that's referred to as question storming, question formulation. It's a pretty simple exercise. It's being used in some schools now. It's developed by this group called the Right Question Institute, a nonprofit group. And it's just simply, you get kids, and you can do it with adults as well. You get people into a small group, and you give them a challenge or a topic, and you have them formulate as many questions as they can about it. So when you do this in school, it sounds really simple. It is really simple. It's a really simple exercise. I'll give you guys some resources later, so you can, if you want to try it and use it in a classroom or something, it's very easy to do. But it's really effective. It's really powerful. Because what it does is it sort of gets us in the habit of formulating questions, which we're not really in that habit, And it takes something like brainstorming, and it turns it around. Like brainstorming is usually about coming up with answers, right? Who can come up with the best ideas? This is different. This is about who can ask the most questions. And it just exercises a different part of your brain, and it kind of develops this habit of questioning. So there are things like that you can do that begin to make questioning feel safer for students. If you do an exercise like that, all of a sudden students can begin to change their attitude about questioning. They suddenly see, oh, it's not this weird thing that you do at the end of the class. It's actually an activity that has a purpose, and it's valued, and it's something that I feel comfortable doing. I know I can do it. And so I think that's the kind of stuff we need to do to get students more comfortable with asking questions and being willing to share their questions with others. Another reason why this is effective is just simply the fact that you're putting people into a small group is really effective, because a lot of students don't want to ask questions in front of a lot of other people. So they don't want to ask questions in front of 15, 20 other people. But they're okay asking questions in front of 4 other people. So just changing that dynamic a little bit gets them a little more comfortable sharing their questions. Okay, I mentioned earlier making questioning cool. How might we make questioning cool? The one thing I would say is, you make something cool by showing that cool people do it. And so I like to point out that, young people love gadgets. They love technology, right? So one of the things I try to emphasize is that technology is all coming from questions. Like if you go out to Silicon Valley now, those guys are all about the questions. They're all about who can come up with who can challenge something that's going on right now and come up with a new way of doing things. So almost all of the tech innovations that I came upon, almost all of them started with a question. So if you take something like Airbnb started with a question. So it was just these young college graduates who had they were trying to be designers. They were trying to start a design career, actually. And then they noticed that whenever the big design conference came to town in San Francisco, nobody could get a hotel room. But they also noticed that a lot of their friends had an empty room in their apartment, or had an apartment that was available, or even had an air mattress that they could share. So they were wondering, why hasn't someone found a way to connect all these people who come into town and need a bed with all these people who have a bed? And could you use the internet somehow to do that? And that became their driving question. And then once they answered the question, they were billionaires. So it's like, what I try to stress to young people is that this is part of the way to success in today's world, is to be a questioner, because that will in turn help you be an innovator. And being an innovator is a lot of what success in the business world now is about. It's what's driving a lot of success. Netflix came out of a question. Netflix was the founder, Reed Hastings, had rented some videos from Blockbuster. Remember Blockbuster? So he rented videos from Blockbuster. He got hit with a huge late fee, and he just was questioning, why do I have to pay these late fees? Why isn't there a system where you can rent movies or watch movies and you don't have to go back the next day to the video store? And what if you could create a club and people didn't even have to go to a store? They could do it through the internet. They could do it through the mail. So that question drove his business. So basically, what I'm saying to young people in terms of the cool factor is, this is about invention. It's about exploration. If you think of questioning that way, suddenly it becomes a much cooler thing. And it's something that mavericks do. It's something that sort of people who are breaking the rules do. And I think that tends to appeal to young people, even if the people they like in, let's say, pop culture and in hip hop music or whatever. You can point to some of those people and see and point out that they are doing stuff. The people who are really successful are the ones who are like questioning the way it's done and adding a new way of doing it, adding a new wrinkle to it. So anyway, that's the message I try to get across to young people as far as questioning and cool. As far as making it fun and rewarding, I think there's lots of ways to do that. Questioning by its nature lends itself to fun activities, question who can come up with the best question. What can we do with a question once we've come up with a great question together? How do we work on it together? And I think that basically we need to design activities around that kind of work with questioning. I've started doing, in the last couple of years, I've started doing something called Question Week in March. And basically just have schools around the country participate and get their students to just come up with as many questions as they can, share them online, decide which questions they want to share with the rest of the world, work on questions together as a group, and then we just have a week where we try to dedicate as much activity as we can to students asking and coming up with questions. I have colleges participating in this as well, so maybe this spring, maybe get Miami-Dade College involved in this. But it's a really fun thing, and students love to sort of put their questions out there into the world. They just need an invitation to do it. They need to be offered a chance to do it. Questioning, as I say, sort of lends itself to activities and fun, and it lends itself to this instinct that I think young people have naturally, which is they are kind of natural explorers. And they tend to dig in. They tend to want to go deeper and deeper into something once they get into it. So there's this thing called the 5 whys, which some of you may be familiar with, which is some educators are using it now, but it's basically about encouraging people to ask why repeatedly when they're trying to figure out a problem. Like, don't just ask why once, keep asking why, and use why questions to dig in. And this actually, the 5 whys came out of Japan, and it came out of the Toyota car company. And the founder of Toyota realized that when there was a problem, people would often ask why one time, and they would get the most surface solution or the most surface answer. So if a part came off the assembly line at Toyota and it was defective, and they would ask why, and maybe the first answer would be, oh, the assembly line worker messed up. and then they would blame the poor guy who messed up. But if you kept asking why, you would say, okay, why did he mess up? And then you might discover, okay, well, it was a new system or new part that we haven't had training in. Well, why haven't we had training in that? Well, then you would discover, well, the training program got its budget cut last year, and so we couldn't add on. So what they would find is that if you kept asking why, you would get to the deeper problem underneath the surface problem. And this is a great thing to teach young people about, because a lot of us, tend to assume the answers are simple and they're on a surface level. And I think we need to sort of train people that, no, you have to go deeper on a challenge. You have to be willing to look at the factors that are underneath it and the ones that are underneath that. And I think the 5 whys can help do that. I think we also need to celebrate questions. I think that questions kind of go out there into the world and they disappear. People ask a question, but you never see it, you never feel it. So one of the things that some schools do now is they do wonder walls, and they post questions and they write them down, they share them, they put them online. And when you do that, you're giving a kind of permanence to the question, and you're showing that it's important, you're celebrating it. So I think anything we can do to make questions more important, make them last more, give them more impact, that's going to have a big effect. One last thing I'll mention is that we need to encourage students to take ownership of their questions. And this is a really big thing because, when I talk about those companies and innovations that started with a question, well, it's true that they started with some person asking a question, but the real magic was that the person took ownership of the question. Okay, so the guy who asked about his Blockbuster video, why do I have to pay these Blockbuster fees? He didn't stop there, Like if he'd just asked that question and then moved on, all he'd be doing is complaining, right? That would just be whining. But he took ownership of that question. He said, I'm going to work on that. I'm going to think about that. I'm going to dedicate myself to that. And I've seen in so many cases of breakthroughs and innovation, that's what it's about. It's about finding an interesting question, but then being willing to commit, to be willing to dedicate yourself to that question in some way. When I was working on A More Beautiful Question, I met this teenager, Jack Andraka, who someone in his family had died of I believe it was prostate cancer, and he went to work. He was wondering, why isn't there a better system for detecting early cancer in people that have this in prostate cancer conditions? And he went to work on that question as a student while he was still a high school student, and he developed a really interesting screening system. It's still being kind of worked on and developed, but it's a really interesting idea that he came up with. And the reason is that he took this question and he stayed with it, So I think this is like a really important message to get across to young people, is that not only do we need to be asking questions, but we need to stay with our questions. We need to be willing to pick a great question, a question that we're fascinated by, and then say, I'm going to make this my question. Or if it's a group of people, we're going to make this our question. Maybe it's a class that decides they're going to have our question that we're going to work on. It could be a whole school that decides we're going to have our question that we work on, I sometimes use the term mission questions, a mission question being a question we're going to all work on together as a mission. And I believe that mission questions are better than mission statements. Because every organization out there has a mission statement, and a lot of times the mission statements, they don't have that much impact, to be honest. Like, I don't know why, but mission statements often don't resonate that much with people. They think, oh yeah, it's just a statement, it doesn't mean anything. If you turn a mission statement into a question, it kind of changes it. It changes the tone of it, So let's say you had a robotics company, and their mission statement is, "We make the world a better place through robotics." Like, that doesn't sound very good, because it sounds like an ad slogan almost, right? We make the world a better place through robotics. But if they phrase that as, how might we make the world a better place through robotics? You see the change in tone there? All of a sudden it goes from being this arrogant kind of declaration, we do this, to how could we do this? How might we do this? And that change in tone is really important, that people react totally differently when they hear that. All of a sudden, what they hear is like, oh, this is an organization that is really on a mission to do something. They really want to do something. It also sounds like an invitation to people. How might we? How might we do something? Invites people to be part of it. So I really urge, I've been urging companies to get rid of their mission statements and turn them into mission questions, because it's likely to engage people much more. Okay, so a few more things, and then we're going to get into some questions, I hope. As adults, how might we become better questioners? This is a big, big challenge, okay, because we're all kind of locked in our ways of doing things. We have our familiar patterns, our habits. I think one of the challenges you have to do to become a better questioner, you have to kind of release that inner 4-year-old, right? That inner 4-year-old child. And the issue is, how do you do that? Part of it is being both humble and confident enough to do it. The questioning is an interesting thing. Questioning is like a balance between humility and confidence, right? Because in order to ask questions, you do have to have a certain level of humility, right? It means you're admitting you don't know. It means you're admitting you have to learn. So there's humility. But then you also have to be confident to ask questions, because you have to be confident enough to admit that you don't know and admit that you're willing to learn. So that I think becoming a better questioner requires us to somehow achieve that balance between these two things, humility and confidence. I think it also kind of means we have to get used to looking at things in a different way. All of us are used to seeing things the same way. This gets back to that Steve Jobs quote, why he would go around the company and ask, why are we doing it that way? Why are we doing it that way? He was trying to get people to see things from a fresh perspective. So I think for us to become better questioners, we have to kind of develop that habit. I use the term vuja de again. George Carlin. George Carlin coined this term, saying that deja vu is when you've never been somewhere, but it feels like you've been there before. Vuja de is when you've been somewhere 1,000,000 times, but you have to make it seem like you've never been there. Okay? So to him, trying to be a comedian was about vuja de. Instead of getting up there and doing the same routine all the time and getting bored with it, he had to make it seem new. He had to make it seem fresh. So all of us, I think, in our own way, have to do this vuja de. We have to figure out how is it that we see things that are familiar and see them as if we're seeing them the first time. Now, I don't know, there's no simple formula for how you do that. I think all of us just have to try. It's really about trying, It's about being willing to step back and kind of look from a different angle. And it's up to each of us to figure out how to do that for ourselves. But it's something it's a key to being a good questioner. I also want to share with you that these are the 3 questions I love the most: why, what, if, and how. So just keep in mind that these 3 questions are kind of the holy trinity of questioning, right? And you want to be asking these 3 questions a lot. You want to be encouraging your students to ask these 3 questions. I mean, they're question stems, actually. But, the great open-ended questions start with these 3 question stems. And I spent a lot of time studying these 3 types of questions. And when we get into discussion, if you want to go deeper on this, but I believe these 3 questions lead to change and innovation. I believe these 3 questions work well together in sequence with each other. I think that if you ask them sequentially, why, what if, and how, you have a very good chance of getting to an answer. Why is that? Well, because the three questions do three different things. When we ask why, we're trying to understand a problem. When we ask what if, we're trying to imagine and come up with ideas. When we ask how, we're getting more practical, and we're trying to start solving the problem. So a lot of the stories of innovation that I found, it would start with someone asking why. Why hasn't somebody come up with a better X, right? And then the next thing you know, the person would be saying, well, what if I took this approach and I combined it with that approach? So that's the second stage. And then by the end, they're trying to figure out how to do it. They're trying to say, okay, I see that if I combine this with that, it would be an interesting possibility, but how do I do it? How do I make it work? How do I do it affordably? How do I get started? So there's this sequence that innovators would often go through where they'd start with the trying to get their brain around something, then they'd use their imagination, then they'd start actually getting practical and figuring it out. This is actually tied to sort of classic models of human behavior and human problem solving that go back probably to the wheel, basically it's about understanding, it's about imagining, and then finally it's about doing or making. And what I've done is kind of boil it down to three question stems. But anyway, it's an interesting model. Keep it in your back pocket and use it. Teach it to kids. I have more resources on this I'll share with you. But it's a really fun thing. And students love it. Students love, you share this framework with them, they will like it. I guarantee it. They'll like the idea. Okay, now we're at the why stage. Okay, now we're at the what if stage. Okay, now we're at they like when you give stages and frameworks that they can grab onto. When you're at the how stage, remember this question stem, how might we? Very powerful. It's being used a lot now in the business world, particularly among innovative companies. It's interesting. You wouldn't think that phrase would be powerful, like there's nothing that special about it on the surface. It seems to ignite something when people ask, how might we questions together. The three words work very well together. How is about figuring out. Might is probably the key word there. Might is about possibilities. So you don't say, how should we, how can we, you say, how might we. It opens up more creativity. And of course, we is about together. It's about collaboration. So this is a really important question stem to use when you're trying to solve problems. Bring people together and phrase your questions as how might we questions. And again, as I mentioned earlier, think about once you get into using how might we questions, think about turning a how might we question into a mission question, something that you could work on long term. So if you've got a group of people and you're trying to solve a problem, if you've got a class and you want to go deeper on an issue, think about how you could formulate a how might we question that the group could pursue over time and pursue long term. And how might we questions can be, once you come up with a great how might we question, you can post it on the wall, you can share it with other people, you can put it out there into the world. Now, on some of these things I've talked about, I want to leave you some resources if you want to go deeper on things like how might we, or why, what if, and how. Let me just go back, actually. This is a URL. If you go to that, you're going to see some articles. You can take a picture of that maybe with your camera if you want. It's just my main website, amorebeautifulquestion.com, and then /schools. What this has in terms of the resources are just general tips on classroom questioning, ways to encourage more questions among students. A lot of my work on this is originated with K through 12, but I think it all is just as relevant with college students. I mean, basically, the challenges don't change. The problems that get in the way of questioning pretty much stay the same, whether you're talking about grade level students or college students. There's an article there about how might we questions and sort of the origin of that as a tool and how you can use it. And then there's stuff on why, what if, and how, that cycle, that framework of three questions and how to use them to solve problems. There's also something on how to avoid being a question jerk. So a question jerk is someone who asks questions the wrong way or asks questions that are not really questions, like, what were you thinking? So when someone is, the key to asking good questions is you want them to be authentic. You want there to be curiosity behind your questions. If there's actual curiosity, then it's probably a good question. If you're using the question simply to criticize or to, make a point or something like that, then it may not be as good a question. So again, that's morebeautifulquestion.com/schools. And that's, I want to get to a few questions you guys might have. One final thought is just on why questioning matters is it matters on two levels, or many levels, but there's two levels I would focus on here. And one is that it matters for your students. It matters in terms of their future and their ability to be successful in the world. They're going to have to be innovators. They're going to have to be people who can change directions, people who can adapt in the new world, and questioning is going to be key to that. They have to be very comfortable asking questions in order to adapt in that new world. But then the second part of it is not just their careers and their career success, but to be good citizens and for us to have a good democracy. We're going to need those young people to be better questioners than our generation is, or some of the previous generations are proving to be. We're going to need them to I think of this quote from Carl Sagan he said this 20 years ago, and I think it's really true now. But just think about that. If we're not able to ask the questions, then we're susceptible. We're very susceptible to bad leaders, bad information. We're susceptible to a lot of bad stuff. So I think one of the challenges is we have to arm the citizens of tomorrow for this world that is going to be throwing a lot of stuff at them really quickly. And one of the best tools we can give them is the ability and the comfort with asking questions. So thank you very much for listening. And this is how you can reach me. You can connect with me on Twitter, email. I love to get questions. Let's see, we have some time for questions now. So let's take some questions, shall we? Yeah.
I just want to say thank you. One of the things I include on my syllabus is underneath the textbook and loosely paper, pens, pencils, burning questions. And we spend a lot of time at the beginning of the semester kind of creating a shared meaning for what that is, and you've given me some tools just in your brief talk this morning.
Great.
I'll do that, I think, this semester. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad it was useful for you. Anybody else have any questions? I know there's some questions out there, burning questions or otherwise. Yes?
During the workshop, you're going to go deeper about exploring the next phase, I guess, aside from the question?
Yeah, well, what I'll do in the workshop is I want to have you run through that exercise that I showed you where people go into groups and formulate questions. And the purpose is so that you can see how it works and figure out if it might be something that might be usable in your classrooms or in the schools, wherever. That's basically the idea. It's a technique, it's a tool, fairly simple. So I want to show people how it works, and then they may decide it's something that, hey, I can do something with it. And I'll probably also build off that a little bit with a little bit about how might we questions. I'll talk about formulating how might we questions a little bit also. So, yeah, anybody else have any questions back there? Yeah.
Part of the problem that I was seeing is you added time,
Yeah.
which is, I think, the big root problem with it, is
Right.
we don't make time for creativity and reflection.
Absolutely. No, that's in fact one of the when we do the exercise later, the last step of it is reflection. And it's really important because when not only do you want to get students in the habit of asking more questions, but then you want them to reflect on that, the fact that they did that, and how did it feel when they did that, and were they comfortable with it, and what did they learn about asking questions and how it can help them. So I think reflection is always a really, really big part of of questioning. It's one of the things that they sort of go hand in hand, reflection and questioning, right? Because when we reflect, one of the things we're doing is asking questions, right? The reflection is about, what did I just learn? Or what do I still need to learn? Or what am I taking from all this? How have I changed because of this? Or how is this relevant to what I'm working on? So I think, reflection and questioning are definitely hand in hand. And I think unfortunately, it should be, every lesson in every school should end with reflection, and it often doesn't. And instead, it's just, the way questions get used at the end of lessons now is just, does anybody have any questions? That's it. Does anybody not know something and want to share that they don't know? And so what you're doing when you do that is first of all, you're limiting the role of questions, but you're also putting people a little bit in an uncomfortable situation, because you're saying, if they raise their hand, they're going to have to admit they don't know something. So I'm a big believer that the questions at the end of a lesson have to be radically changed, that it should not be, does anybody have any questions? It should, I don't even know the answers, the solution. Someone said to me that what they do, which I kind of like, is they say, what questions do we have? So right away, it's a very subtle change, right? But right away, it's not, does anybody have any questions? But what questions do we have says, there's going to be questions. But I think you can go further than that. I think that the whole way questions are asked at the end of a lesson needs to be reinvented by educators so that it becomes much more vital. And of course, who's to say it has to be at the end of the lesson, by the way? It should be interspersed throughout. Maybe we should be starting with the question. Maybe there should be questions before there's any teaching at all. There should be questions. Have people go in blind and ask questions. Have people ask questions when they're ignorant. Because that has a powerful effect. It shows you what they're interested in before they even know anything. And so I'm a big believer in asking questions up front, So anyway, there's a lot of room for change in the way questions are used. Anybody else? In the middle of the room? Yeah?
I was glad to see that you included Socrates in your questions.
Yeah.
Doesn't it seem in a way that philosophy is a discipline, is sort of being, what is it, you called it, a questionologist?
Yeah, it is. And although, it's funny, I have to be aware of talking about philosophy when I talk to, especially if I talk to businesses, because philosophy is like a dirty word in the business world, So, yeah, it really is, because they think in the business world, they equate philosophy with no action. All thinking, all words, no action. So, so one of the things I will say is that, questioning, it can start as philosophy, but it can also end up as action. So you can start out just thinking and debating something, but you can also use questioning to get to how might we actually do something? How might we take the first step? That's a question. So questions can definitely be actionable. They can be action-oriented. So that's one of the big points I make, is that yes, there is philosophy involved here, and it's good. Philosophy is a good thing. We need to think. We need to work out these problems and think about them. But there's also action. You can also use questions to move forward and get stuff done. And that really resonates with business people, because they are afraid. They're afraid if people start asking why, that it's just going to be a spiral, and it will never go anywhere, and everyone will be saying, well, why are we doing this? Well, why are we doing that? And so you have to kind of reassure them, no, it doesn't have to be that way. You can start out with why, but you can move to how are we going to do this? What if we try that? And those are very action-oriented questions.
Yeah, if I could follow up, I noticed knowledge was one of the barriers. And
Yeah.
in classes, it's often asking them to question things that they'll say, but everybody knows that.
Right, exactly.
No, everybody assumes that.
Yeah.
And then you don't question it.
Yeah.
In fact, it might not even be.
Yeah. Although, there's an interesting thing today. I mean, we want to encourage this idea of question everything. But I was thinking about this recently, is that we're in this world right now where there's also a lot of conspiracy theorizing, right? So how do you balance that idea that you're trying to get people to question everything and not get them to veer into the idea that nothing is true And everything should be questioned to the point where I don't believe anything, except maybe the craziest thing. So that's kind of an interesting, when you get into this world of question everything, you do have to be a little wary of that, creating someone who is so skeptical that they will not accept anything as true or real. And that's a little bit interesting. That's an interesting challenge, yeah.
You mentioned early on the importance of observation.
Yeah.
And questioning, and I'd be curious, here's my question, what are some new ways or good ways or different ways to instill or teach observation and value in work? You don't have to answer that.
The only thing, I don't know that there's any tricks with observation other than slowing down and taking the effort to do it. So there are a lot of companies out there. There's a company I work with sometimes called IDEO. That's a big innovation company. So they go in with big companies, they teach them how to be innovative. And IDEO does a lot with observation. And all they are doing is telling people to slow down, pay attention, and notice. And it goes back to the George Carlin stuff I was talking about. Almost think of yourself as an outsider so that you can notice things the way an outsider would notice. One of the people at IDEO told me, he said we should think as if we're travelers. So he said when you're traveling in a strange place, you tend to notice everything because you're in this new environment, you're trying to figure it out. He said we have to be travelers every day in our own familiar world. We have to have the same kind of willingness to look at things that way. And I don't know, again, that's just a matter of taking the time to do it, trying to shift perspective. I don't know if you remember the Robin Williams movie, Dead Poets Society, where he got the kids to stand on the desks. And it's about that. I mean, what he said, he got the kids to stand on the desk, and the reason why is because the world looks different when you're standing up on the desk. Everything that looked one way suddenly looks different. So somehow, observation is about finding ways to do that. Just getting yourself to pay more attention, getting yourself to see something from a different angle, that's all I know about it. The main thing is trying to do it. Most of us don't try. We don't take the time. All of this stuff takes time.
Communicating the value.
Yeah, communicating the value.
Shared.
Yeah, realizing that it's worth the time. It's worth slowing down. All of this is about slowing down, which of course in today's world, we don't want to slow down. We want to go faster, faster, faster. But a lot of thinking, a lot of observing is really about slowing down. And so we have to convince people every now and then, take a slower approach to things. Take a slower approach to watching. Take a slower approach to observing, thinking, making decisions, that kind of thing. Yeah. Any more? One last question? Okay.
I have a quick question. As a journalist, I'm sure you've interviewed people that have been evasive on the questions because
Yeah.
to challenge the status quo and the power structure.
Right.
How do you handle when the person answering is kind of evading or doesn't want to deal with the question? What's a good way of getting them to...
Usually it's by repeating the question, only with slightly different language. You change the wording and you ask the same question again. A lot of times it's not going to work. I mean, if someone is determined not to answer, then they will not answer. But what we don't realize a lot of times is people are willing to answer, but we don't give them a chance. So one thing that you have to learn as a journalist is when you ask a question, give someone a chance to answer. A lot of journalists will immediately jump to another question or they'll cut someone off. The fact is, when you ask someone a question, they need to process it, and it may take a few seconds, and so you have to be willing to let the silence kind of go for a minute, and then they may give you an answer. Sometimes you need to help them along a little bit. Sometimes you need to say, you may need to break the question down and say, let me rephrase that question, or let me